What's up, Pathway students? I'm Andrew.
And I'm Tori, and we're a part of the student leadership team. We are so excited to have you all here joining us online for student services.
Before we get into today's message, we have a few announcements for you guys.
If you want to grow as a person and have a ton of fun, you should get involved in our student leadership here at Pathways. Go ahead and send us an email or DM us on social media. We'd love to have you.
And you can get one of these really cool student leadership shirts. And while we're on that subject, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit us up on all of our social media down below.
Today we are starting a brand new series called Stand Your Ground. This week, Pastor Chad will be talking about the evidence we have as God being our creator and the creator of the universe. People have believed some pretty crazy stuff. What do you think?
Like when people thought the earth was on a turtle's back, or that the moon was a projection.
Or when the earth was flat.
So grab those pens, Bibles, and journals, and here
we
go.
Hello, boys and girls. Today we will be learning... Nope, guys, I can't do this. Woo. All right, okay, that's much better. Listen, I am completely stoked for this new series. Apologetics is near and dear to my heart because when I was growing up, I felt like people kept telling us to take everything on blind faith. Yet, when you read Scripture, God tells us He has revealed Himself in nature. Read Romans 1:20 with me. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made so that people are without excuse. So I believe there was more to Christianity than blind faith. I needed answers. So I began to learn apologetics, which is just giving a defense of the Christian faith. The Bible calls us to be ready to give these answers for the hope that is within us. Apologetics is not about saying you're sorry, nor is it just about arguing with people. It's also not what is going to lead most people to Jesus, but what it will do is mow down those mental barriers like doubt that can keep people from embracing the gospel message. Take, for instance, my personal story. I remember in one of my first ministries, there were some students that they let me know they had a friend that kept getting kicked out of churches because he didn't like that no one can answer his questions. I said I would love to meet that kid. So one day he hopped in the van to go pick him up. He didn't know I was going to be there, but when he stepped out of his house, he threw up his middle fingers and shouted a curse word at God. Now, I thought it was hilarious, but he actually felt bad when he got in the van. I said, "What's up, homie?" He just laughed. After months of him trying to annoy me with questions to stump me, he couldn't. A few months later, and after hours of conversation, he accepted Jesus. He even ended up playing the role of Jesus in our church play, you guys. Just a few years back, this same boy lost his life, but through apologetics and just having an honest conversation, he is now in heaven, rocking it out with Jesus. So tonight, we begin a journey. On April 8th, 1966, Time magazine posted a cover reading, "Is God dead?" Many people began to believe what the media was selling. A few years later, Time magazine posted another cover that read, "Is God coming back to life?" The complete reversal in the headlines from Time magazine is a reflection of the academic and scientific community because the more we learn, the more evident it is that there is, in fact, a creator God. So much so that 73% or 3/4 of scientists believe in a higher power and 63% in the God of the Bible. In fact, scientists are 12% more likely to take their faith seriously and worship regularly than people who work other jobs. What this means is that even though people used to think that science would do away with religion, or that science and faith are on opposite ends of the spectrum, science actually shows that a powerful being outside of time and space exists. I hope the same information we go through in this series will lead you and your friends to the same conclusion. Let's look at what's at stake here if people are unconvinced that a creator God exists. One of the most famous atheists in the world, Richard Dawkins, says this: "There is no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference. We are machines for passing on DNA. It is every living object's sole reason for being." Bertrand Russell, another famous atheist, writes, "The universe is just there, and that's all." Do you see what happens when someone is convinced that there is no God who created us with a purpose? We end up without a purpose, without meaning, and without the ability to even believe in right versus wrong. From this point of view, value, meaning, and purpose are just illusions. Now, we aren't saying that an atheist can't be good or that they can't find a meaning for their life, but we are saying that if God doesn't exist, things like meaning, purpose, right, and wrong are not rooted in anything and are, at the end of the day, illogical. So, if we want to try to show someone that a creator God exists, where do we begin? Well, today we're going to talk about something called the Kalam cosmological argument, which is just a fancy way of saying that we can look at the cosmos, or the universe, and find good reasons to believe it was created by God. Kalam just means eternal. So when we talk about the Kalam cosmological argument, the question is, does the universe have a beginning, or is it eternal and always just been there? The argument has two statements and then a conclusion based on those two statements. So if we have good reasons to believe that the statements are true, then the argument is set up so that the conclusion following the statements is the logical conclusion. This is called deductive reasoning. Let's look at our two statements. All right, check this out. Anything that began to exist has a cause, and the universe began to exist. Now, if these two statements are true, here's the true conclusion. The universe has a cause. So what we need to ask is, are our statements true? Because if both statements are true, then the conclusion is also true. So let's go back to premise one. Is it true that anything that began to exist has a cause? It most certainly is. Believing that something can just pop into existence without a cause is crazier, you guys, than believing in magic. At least with magic, you have a magician, kind of like Zach. We also know that just from everyday experience that things don't just pop into existence out of nowhere, and we know that life cannot come from non-life. So, we can know fairly easily that it is definitely true that anything that began to exist has a cause. If it begins to exist, something needs to cause that thing to begin. Spontaneous generation, you guys, is not a thing. All right, so now let's look at statement two. The universe began to exist. Many atheists would say that the cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be. Is this true? Is the universe eternal? I believe that there is scientific evidence that supports a beginning for the universe. And my favorite reason is an acronym called SURGE. Each letter in SURGE represents a reason we can know that the universe began to exist. Let's start with S in SURGE. The S stands for the second law of thermodynamics. This is just a fancy science lingo for saying that we have a limited amount of energy in the universe and that the energy is slowly being used up. Think about a car running out of gas or a flashlight getting left on and running out of batteries. The energy created from the gas in the car or the battery in the flashlight is used up and we can't get it back. This means that the universe is slowly running out of energy and that if it's been around for forever, it would have run out of energy a long time ago. This is what the S in SURGE stands for, and it is just one reason we have for believing the universe had a beginning. Now, the second letter in the acronym SURGE is U, and the U stands for the universe is expanding. Check this out. In 1927, Edwin Hubble, the guy that the Hubble telescope is named after, was studying light in space and figured out that the universe was expanding and galaxies were moving farther apart. He figured this out based on the color things appear in space and what we know about light waves. It's crazy. This means that things had once been closer together and have not been moving away from each other for all of eternity. All right, take a balloon, for instance, you guys. All right, check this balloon out right here. I got some little smiley face buttons on here, and on the surface of this balloon kind of represents the universe or space itself. Now, the galaxies themselves will stay the same size, but as space expands, or the universe, you'll see that they move farther away from each other. Now, my asthmatic self had a hard time with that, but what you can see is how the galaxies moved farther apart, stayed the same size as space was moving. The galaxies moved with it. How cool is that? This is what Edwin Hubble discovered what was happening in space. What this means is that if the universe is expanding, we can trace it back to a single point in time. All right, let's look at R in the SURGE acronym. R stands for the radiation from the Big Bang. In 1965, two scientists, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, found radiation energy, which is light and heat, that ended up being the afterglow from the Big Bang. They actually discovered the radiation from the explosion that caused the beginning of the universe. And they actually ended up winning a Nobel Prize in 1978 for this huge discovery. The next point in SURGE is G, and it's about the formation of other galaxies. NASA sent a satellite in space, and by tracking the radiation energy from the explosion we just talked about in R, we discovered that the energy level of these waves changed ever so slightly in the exact ways that were necessary for galaxies to form, because galaxies need specific amounts of heat and energy in order to form properly. These changes showed us that the explosion and expansion of the universe was precisely tweaked to cause just enough matter to gather together and allow galaxies to form. What? Basically, it was like looking at the beginning of the universe for scientists, you guys. All right, that was an absolutely incredible discovery. Check this out. George Smoot, the project leader from NASA, said, if you're religious, it's like looking at God. Stephen Hawking, a famous atheist, said it was the most important discovery of the century, if not all time. Now, for the E in Surge, E stands for Einstein's theory of general relativity. This is one of my favorite points because the theory of general relativity shows that time, space, and matter came into existence at the same time, and they need each other in order to exist at all. You cannot have one without the other. This means that all three had to come into existence at the same exact time. For time, space, and matter to all come into existence at the same time, something, watch this, outside of time, space, and matter had to cause them to exist. And the cool thing about this, guys, Genesis 1:1 describes when it says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. How amazing is that? Robert Gastro, head of NASA and an agnostic astronomer. Agnostic just means they don't know if there's enough information to prove that God could exist or not. Says, now we see the astronomical evidence that leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. Are you guys excited? Because I am. What we've seen is that science has shown the universe began to exist at a single point in time, which is exactly what we set out to do. Do you remember statement 2? The universe had a beginning. All of this stuff in the universe around us clearly came into existence at some point in the past, and it didn't all come from nothing. Whatever brought the universe into existence must have been timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, and personal because it brought time, space, matter, and all these creatures into existence. But here, we need to ask an important question. Did this creator God have a cause? Who created the being that created the universe? If everything has a beginning, shouldn't God have a beginning? But statement 1 does not say everything has a cause. It just says that everything that had a beginning had a cause. A creator God would not need a cause because he is eternal. He never came into being. See, atheists say that the universe is eternal and without a cause, but we have evidence that says the universe does have a cause and is created. So instead of seeing the universe as the uncreated eternal thing, it makes much more sense to see God as the eternal and uncaused thing that has always existed. When we ask who made God, it's kind of like asking, how can you taste the color pink? This is what we call a logical fallacy. Think about if I asked you the question, how much does a musical note weigh? You would be like, wait, what? Yes, I agree. The question doesn't even make sense. Music is not something you weigh. Asking who made God makes just as little sense. It only makes sense to ask, who made this? If that thing has been made. So if I ask who made my shoes, well, shoes were made and the question makes sense. But God, by definition, is the kind of thing that cannot be made. In fact, if God was made, then he wouldn't be God. So we can't ask who made the eternal, uncaused creator of the universe. So here's what we know now. The universe began to exist, and science has proven that. The universe cannot be eternal. A being outside of time and space created time and space. It must have been timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, and personal. Now, this definitely sounds like God, but we actually aren't arguing for the God of Christianity just yet. What we are arguing for is a God that brought everything into existence, and there are a lot of religions who believe in a creator God. But by the end of this series, we will have shown that this creator God that exists is in fact the God of the Christian Bible. Next week, we will look at another way that science shows there is a designer of the universe, and it will blow your mind. Tonight, ponder this. With all this evidence, can we really say there isn't a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, and personal being that brought every other thing into existence? Friends, if Christianity isn't true, I could live a completely different life. But the evidence has pointed me, as it will you, to live for this creator God. I'll see you next week.
God is invitational. God creates in order to invite his creatures into his life and his love. He did not need to create, but he wanted to create, precisely because it is natural and good to invite others to share in things that are beautiful and great. We share our favorite songs, shows, pieces of art, because we find beauty in them, and we want others to share in that beauty with us. In creating humanity, God has done this with himself. He's invited us as human beings to share in His life, His love, and His beauty. And that life, that love, that beauty is available to all of us today. In fact, living in God's life and love is what it means to live in the kingdom of God. It is what gives purpose to our lives and meaning to our existence as we share that life and love to the people around us. And it all starts with acknowledging that you are not your own. You've been created by God and you can be redeemed by God. When you place Jesus as the King of your life, you share in the most beautiful thing of all, God Himself, the Creator of all things.
What an amazing conversation. What did you think?
It was really interesting, and I learned a lot. For example, I now know that by using forensic science, we can show that God exists and that our faith is not blind.
Yeah, that's really good. Go ahead and click on those Zoom links, and we will see you guys back here next week at 6:30.
See ya, homie.
Woo!